Welcome to our Bucky Critical Path reading call for this July 8th or 9th, depending on which continent you're on. And here we are. Joe, how are you feeling and what do you expect to get out of tonight?
How am I feeling? Feeling good. I'm yeah, a little bit tired, but I feel good. What am I expecting to get out of tonight? Looking to continue to build on some of the very interesting things that we discussed last week. And I don't know whether we're going to start right away with the book or we're going to dive into some conversation, but I'm eager for exploration either way. And so it's an honor to be here with you guys this evening. And, thank you, Manu, again for getting up on a Sunday morning. So how are you feeling, Manu? What do you want to take away from that?
I feel good. I'm happy that we're here. At least three, forms of stuff that closes, that can receive, that can have some energy moving. Really, what is on my mind is what is going on in the world now. If there is a NATO meeting on Tuesday, and then there are BRICS that are meeting in South Africa next month. And in between, there is Janet Yellen in China. And there are all of these accusations of nukes. I don't know if it's brinkmanship or whatever, but it makes the world around us very jittery. And reading Critical Path, though we are at the phase where we're building on history and method, how, Bucky recounts things to buttress his thesis, made me kind of reflect that is imperative that we be able to think. That is to get out of the way of the flow of information and be able to contemplate the patterns that are unfolding and make some individual decisions or engage constructively with people that we met or that we can influence. And that's my expectation, is that we will continue to open our minds to that, learn better, and be better citizens of this spaceship Earth. That's more or less what I expect. So, Steve, how do you feel? What do you expect?
Well, I'm really excited. Now having moved to my new apartment, I found my Critical Path book.
Nice.
So I now have my book next to my my reading, and that'll help a little bit get oriented on this on the reading assignment. Bucky's view of history is really, I mean, to think he published this in the 80s, what a worldview he had. And of course, I think he'd probably, if he were alive today, he'd die just to roll over in his grave with everything that's going on. I mean, I become very aware there are a couple of Democratic people that are trying to get in have a debate with President Biden, of the same party as President Biden. And they're willing to bring up some topics that need to be discussed. And so what a crazy time we live in. And I anticipate that we're going to have a great discussion, and we're going to read some, and I'm going to continue to broaden my perspective. This last week, I found a Vertasium is a physics guy, Eric something, or Derek, and he does a conversation on entropy. And I sent it to a few people. I sent it to you with some of my notes about how, because he doesn't bring up the term anti-entropic, but he does talk about how critical entropy is for life to happen. And I'm still kind of cogitating on that. In fact, I sent it out to everybody. I even listened to it twice and took notes because there were key phrases that I thought were kind of exciting. The Earth receives, for every photon the Earth receives from the sun, high energy photon, the Earth emits 20 photons of less energy. But because energy in the system stays constant, what comes in, somehow the energy from the sun through entropy dissipates and creates the possibility of life. And I'm still looking at that, trying to comprehend that. So anyway, I sent that out to a few people. If anybody's interested, in fact, I'll tell you what, I'll put the link in the chat for those who are watching this and want to see it right away. So I'll do that. So I'm just looking forward to a good conversation today. I thought Anne was, maybe she was just checking in really quickly to tell us that she wouldn't be able to be here today. But I've sent her an email. I guess, Manu, you sent her a WhatsApp invitation. So I guess we're ready to proceed.
So
Go ahead.
I was just going to say really quickly, I had, the opportunity to attend a conference this past week, talking about some of the issues that you guys have brought up, specifically with U.S. China relations and Ukraine, the whole situation, and it's pretty dire. They were very concerned, and these are some of the leading people in the world. So this is somebody who's leading the 17 sustainable goals for the UN, who came up with them, actually, which are very, very much in line with Bucky's principles. But he did mention, Jeffrey Sachs said that this is a really, this war could have ended a lot earlier, and that that a military industrial complex is very real, and is keeping things in a state of where things could go wrong, and of instability. And he was there for the fall of the Soviet Union, perestroika, and all that. But it was pretty eye-opening to see multiple leaders from different countries saying that that some of these agreements that we are now kind of aligning, and we're building these blocks of countries, and actually we're kind of Australia is aligning with the US and the UK, and their policies one and the same, and it's not necessarily a policy that is working towards living green.
Yeah.
So anyway, it was an interesting conference. It was quite quite an interesting thing.
Did you attend it professionally, Joe, or did you attend it just because you were interested?
Just because I was interested.
And was anybody from the CIA there or stuff, or were they just?
No, it was somebody from the Chinese government, somebody from Australia, and then the fourth person was from Japan, I believe.
Yeah. And see,
And so, yeah,
Australians, the French are all jerk because the French were going to sell submarines to
subs.
Australia, and then the Americans in the UK got together with the Australians, canceled the order on the French because they wanted to have atomic submarines as an anti-China posturing.
And that's I'm sorry.
No, I'm kind of reaffirming what you said, added a little
Yeah.
bit more to the conversation. Manu, I don't know how current events we want to get and how political we want to get, but Manu asked how RFK, Robert F. Kennedy Jr., was positioning in light of the American presidential's elections. And I put in the comments that he's positioning himself as a John F. Kennedy Democrat. And if we get into the detail of it, and I hate to get into the short hair, but he has proof that the CIA killed his uncle, John F. Kennedy, and it was because of his Cuba stance. And what most people don't know, you brought up the Russian situation. What most people don't know is that John F. Kennedy made a private agreement, a secret agreement with Khrushchev to pull our intermediate range nuclear missiles out of Turkey if the Russians would pull their intermediate range missiles out of Cuba. The only reason why the Russians were putting their missiles in Cuba was because we put missiles in Turkey. So JFK made an agreement on the side, and JFK inherited that military industrial complex that Eisenhower was warning everybody about. And Robert F. Kennedy talks about how the Biden administration has all the neocons, all the aggressive war guys. There's plans to take over China. There were plans at the time that the CIA or some of these military industrial complex people are really aggressive, and there's plans against China, plans against Russia. The Ukrainian agreement, the Ukrainian war, evidently Russia and Ukraine signed the Minsk agreements, which would have prevented the war, and the US talked Ukraine out of getting out of the Minsk agreements. And I mean, it's just very, very complicated, and a lot of stuff is being handled under the table by the war machine, by the military industrial complex, and most of us know nothing about it. When Khrushchev, or when whoever it wasn't Khrushchev, it was whoever it was that was in charge of Russia when the Russians pulled out of East Germany. They said,
Gorbachev.
What's that?
Gorbachev. Mikhail Gorbachev.
Gorbachev. It was when the Russians pulled out of East Germany. They did it on the basis that the West agreed not to move any other NATO countries closer to Russia borders. That was part of the agreement. So the Russians gave up East Berlin, gave up East Germany, let the Westerners have East Germany on the basis there would be no no movement of NATO towards Russian borders, and that's all we've been doing. You know, and it's one thing to have Sweden be part of NATO. It's one thing to have Finland to be part of NATO, but to have Poland, and all of these other countries down there, including Ukraine, it puts the border right up against Russia, and it just makes major threats. And somehow, the whole idea of the Ukrainian war, gee, I hate to be so political because I don't know that everybody's going to agree with this, but there's a posture in America of Biden for a regime change in Russia, that the reason why we're in Ukraine is to deplete Russian assets. And I'll tell you, it's real complicated because we could have another Iraq, if Putin's gone from Russia, who knows what happens in Russia.
Right.
So, wow. And then to read Fuller's history of basically how the giants, the grunge of the giants is taking over the world. Wow. Crazy.
Something like, I mean, like there's been $160 billion sent to the Ukraine just without any kind of misappropriation from what I don't know if that's
Yeah. Well, I mean,
accurate, but I haven't checked it. But anyway, its bottom line is money's going towards things that aren't preserving life.
yeah. John F. Kennedy was not going to go into Vietnam. And 3 days after he was shot, Johnson went into Vietnam. I mean, Robert F. Kennedy is really putting his foot out there, and he's not doing it with a vengeance. He only brings it up if he's asked. But Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is trying to do this thing to say, hey, we've left everybody behind. The Democratic Party isn't what it used to be. It used to be a party of peace. Used to be a party of anti-pharma. And then when Obama created, in order to get health insurance everywhere, he made an agreement with the pharmaceutical companies not to negotiate prices, just in order to get his Obamacare out there and benefit tens of millions of people, if not hundreds of millions. And just the whole political landscape is shamed. It's completely reshaped. It's in turmoil, and it's all rigged about money. It's all about money.
So that's why we have to say all what is happening. Can we put it in the context of debt? If you put it in the context of debt, then it starts shaping differently, isn't it? Or shading a different light.
Sharing what?
Shedding a different light
different-
on the issues that
It's a
we have.
different light.
Yeah, debt is more general. Debt is global. That is a binder of all the tensions that we have. It's about debt. And how do we generate debt? Who's going to pay that debt? And how, are we going to use the flows that are created by that debt? And for what?
I think it's, we have to be just cautious. China's being demonized too, and I'm not saying they're perfect, but
It's interesting because that's what happened in families. Yes.
it is. I don't know. No.
That's what happened in families.
Yeah.
All of these feuds in families. The same tactics are used.
And they're not good. It's not good.
Yeah,
It's
the
micro.
same.
It's
Yeah.
micro.
And rare are families where you don't have those things. In my
I don't
opinion.
know.
Many.
There's none. You find me one. I just find me one.
Anyway, let's continue reading.
Okay, cool beans. This is where we left off.
Yep.
So life is good. Who wants to?
Why don't you let me give it a shot and see how I feel? If I'm too tired, then I'll
Oh.
pass it on.
I invite you to read slowly and share. Don't, read a little bit and let other people go for it. So have to.
Around the same year, 200 BC, the Stoic philosopher Crates developed the first terrestrial globe. Celestial globes preceded it. It is clear that a special chain of Greek scientists, philosophers, cosmologists, consisting of I don't know, I should know who that is, but I don't. Heraclitus, Heraclitus, and Aristarchus had successfully, 200 BC, had successfully evolved a concept of the solar system that was.
Okay, hang on a second. I'm just gonna.
I should have said 410 BC and 350 BC.
I'm gonna make that correction. That was. There you go, in fair agreement.
In fair agreement with that of Copernicus and Kepler 1700 years later, 1543 AD. And even with our late 20th century conceptioning, it is also clear that beginning with Plato's pupil Aristotle, 384-322 BC, and the latter's practical philosophy, the geocentric concept of the celestial system was, after 200 BC, becoming more and more formally adopted by the world's flat-minded power structure authorities. Despite complexities, this difficulty explained geocentric cosmic systems, planetary behaviors, and sun motion was not considered by the authorities to be an objection, since, as they rationalized it, these matters seemingly had no practical bearing on everyday affairs. It seems almost equally clear that between 200 BC and 200 AD, a deliberately planned policy was adopted by the combined supreme political and religious power structure of that period, which undertook the conditioning of the human reflexes to misconceive and missee, or mostly not see at all, the macro microcosmic systems in which we live. Their success drew the curtains on science for 1700 years, until 1500 AD. That curtain would never again have been raised had it not been for the discovery of that something called nothing, the cipher. Because it was nothing, the information monopolizing, physical property coveting power structure had overlooked it. Only the learned from others' knowledge of the unlimited multiplying and dividing, and thereby ratioing. Okay, thank you. And the relative experiences evaluating capability provided exclusively by the cipher and its leftward positioning of numbers in increments of 10 integers could make it possible individual human knowledge of how to escape from the prison of ignorance successfully established by the church state hierarchy. If you have ever been taught about the cipher and its functioning, there is almost no possibility of your accidentally discovering the computationally operative functioning of nothing, much less feel the necessity of inventing a symbol for that invisible, senseless nothingness. If the positioning of the numbers and its computation facilitating capability had been known by the Alexandrian Greeks, all chances that you might discover this were seemingly banished when the emperors of the Roman Empire usurped and amalgamated the vast religious priesthood power with their already established military supremacy. It was the Asiatic. Asiatic. Thank you. There's two things I should have gotten. And it's I should actually need to write that down. Hang on. I should. That's ridiculous. 800 AD, publishing of the function of the cipher by Al-Khwarizmi. I'm saying that incorrectly, but he's very popular for light, discovering light, something with a distance of light in the eye or something. The Arab that ultimately saved the day when, in about 1200 AD, knowledge of it reached northern Italy and southern Germany by way of Carthage in North Africa. Following the death of Christ and the preaching of his disciples, The promised prospect of salvation for all believers raised the Christian priesthood to unprecedentedly powerful popularity. The combined religious and martial emperorship found its authoritatively formulated credo, meaning I. Humans, was that a belief? Okay,
I believe.
Okay, I'm sorry about that. I believe. Threatened by the BC Greek scientist ever unorthodox thinking and discovering science, as Sir James Jeans said 2 millennia later, is the earnest attempt to set in order the facts of experience. Scientific thinking constantly discovered experimental evidence of the erroneous conceptioning of non-scientific authority. The Emperor Pope did not want any of his subjects attempting to set in order the facts of their own experiences. To cope with the scientist's persuasive experience-supported logic, the Emperor needed popularly plausible divine authority. Though all acknowledged the emperor to be the unquestioned military leader with absolute physical power, he needed also the only by God to be given metaphysical dispensation assertedly relayed to the ordained priest by the succession of popes, an authority that was originally received from the disciples and by the disciples from the Son of God, and is direct authority from God. Thus, officially authorized, the Pope Emperor could require all believers to secretly confess their sins.
Sorry, I see there's a couple of formatting issues here.
To secretly confess their sins to his officials. He could also ordain universal adoption of the most useful to him explanations of the causality of all human experiences. Convenient. The Emperor Pope could tell his people how to behave, how to gain God's favor. If the Emperor Pope accredited the Alexandrian Greeks' development of the sun-centered planetary system, he obviously could not maintain the logic of the concept of a two-dimensional, flat-out world sandwiched in parallel between heaven and above and hell below. The concept of God in heaven above with a sea beside him, to which Christ had ascended, could not be maintained except in a world of commonly parallel to one another, up and down, perpendicular trees, and people on infinitely, omnilaterally extended flat world plane around which the sun and stars set and rose. The cosmology put the Emperor Pope and his God at the center of the universe. The total overall evolutionary events of 400 to 200 BC in the Eastern Mediterranean world saw all the extraordinary Greek intellectual activity transpiring almost exclusively in the city of Alexandria. Founded by Alexander the Great in 332 BC, on the delta at the westernmost mouth of Egypt's river Nile, in 100 BC, the Alexandrian Library was said to have contained 700,000 volumes or manuscript scrolls. Fortunately, some of those volumes in Alexandria were meticulously copied and distributed to libraries around the civilized world of that time. For over 40,000 volumes of the Alexandria Library were burned in 487 BC during a siege in the war between Caesar and Pompey. Interesting. In the 2nd century AD, Ptolemy conceived of his conic latitude and longitude world map, reading British Isles in the west to China in the east. His analogous publication contained a storehouse of navigational data. In the analogous, Ptolemy published his catalog of over 1,000 stars. In 272 AD, a Roman emperor burned the Alexandria Library for a second time. The third burning of the Alexandria Library was accomplished by a later Roman emperor in 391 AD. By 29 AD, all the Mediterranean universities were closed. In 642 AD occurred the final complete burning of the Library of Alexandria by Muslims. As we have already described, the earliest known world maps are Eratosthenes, surprisingly informative 200 BC map, and the 200 AD latitude and longitude divided fan-like cylindrical stretch out of Ptolemy, which dropped out of the, I can't see with your, oh, that's me, the South African territory of the Eratosthenes, but included China,
Let's stop
Arabia,
right-
and India.
Let's stop right there because I think I'm going to put some X's right here so we can come back to it. But I think I had a picture of that map up here somewhere. Maybe it's down below.
I thought the Catholics burned the Library of Alexandria.
That they did what?
I thought they burned the Library of Alexandria, not the Muslims.
No. He said that it was burned 3 times or 4 times. The first 3 times by Roman emperors, Catholics.
Okay, I thought it was
And
all
then
the
last
time.
time by Muslims.
I didn't think the Muslims ever
in
did it.
640 something AD.
Okay, let me find, I said 4 X's. Oh, geez.
But you know, we can, before you even discuss that, look at it geometrically.
What's that?
I say, look at the geometry that Bucky, you know, or what he's saying here. Is that, you know, what I understand is that everything starts with experimentation. People do things and they look at the boundaries of these things and see that maybe they apply more generally. And then you first have a model that is a flat sandwich extending world that was motivated by the fact that you needed some person to be at the center and extending laterally. And then what Ptolemy did basically was to look at it to give it an amplitude, not an amplitude, to give it a relief. Plate, you have a relief. So when you start seeing the relief, you have seen the things from say, yes, there's somebody at the center, but that body at the center is more elevated than the other guys, right? So you start seeing a cone. But the cone can only see that far because if China is still in the northern, technically in the northern hemisphere. You get me?
I'm following.
Rome is in the northern hemisphere at a certain latitude. If you make it the center and then you project laterally, even though conically, China will still be in your vision because China is more or less north of the equator. Yes, there are tropical part of China, but a tropical part, China north of the equator. South Africa is not. So you will not see South Africa in that skirt, right? The skirt of your map will not include South Africa because South Africa is after a certain curve.
Right.
around the equator. So the notion of roundness in a certain direction wasn't accepted. It was cone, yes, but the cone still extending laterally. So you assume that at the outskirts of it, it is just going infinitum to somewhere else. So there's emptiness. And the way, I don't know if we got the importance of the cipher here, what it means geometrically and dynamically.
Yeah, I don't know what that meant either, actually.
Okay, the cipher means that there's another phase. A cipher means there is that point between the convex and the concave through which a new phase emerges. So remember that the centered way was in reality a concave world. It was a concave with a very, very clear center. Whether you take a cone or whatever that you have, it has a center, what you call a center of gravity of it. So everything is from there. But the transformative change to go through a squeeze and emerge something that is divergent or convex is a whole new notion. So you needed invention of that medium, that's zero, that's cipher, to conceive it, for that to be intellectually possible.
Okay.
Go ahead, we were saying.
So the meaning of the cipher was to say, hey, the world is not only what we see here, there's something else. That's what the meaning is. It's a concept. So
What
it's a
year was the
concept
house?
of you are gravitationally, meaning that you are compressing, but you compress to what point? At one point, it has to pop somewhere else.
Mm-hmm.
And when it's popping, it's no more compressing, it's radiating.
Okay.
Quick,
I wish I could take a minute and diagram what he talked about up here in terms of he was describing how Ptolemy and others
Sorry,
had
there it is. This map here. That one, that's what
yeah, that's what I was looking. Yeah,
cone, yes.
that's what I was looking. That's what I was
The
looking.
center in Alexandria, you see that Africa is cut out. Or South Africa. But go on, see, go to where you wanted to be.
well, I don't know, somewhere in here he was talking about how heaven and earth and heaven and hell and the planets in between, and I wish I could think more
But
about
yeah, how the Pope essentially would, basically couldn't let the information from the Library of Alexandria get out because essentially it would call into question the idea of heaven and hell, considering their view of the world at that time.
But there was a contradiction, isn't it? You can't talk about parallel universe and then the relationship between them.
Right.
You cannot say that there are two flats. You are in between. All of that is parallel, infinitely extending, and still have a relationship, a vertical relationship between them. It's a big
crazy.
contradiction. Yes.
They had nothing to fear. Well, I guess they did, but still.
Okay, well, I think this is the map. The Ptolemy map is the one that he showing that has no, the other map had Africa wrong at the bottom. This shows no bottom at all on Africa, like as if it falls off the earth.
Hmm.
Very interesting. Okay.
I'll keep going.
Okay, let me see if I can get this to I think I have to come out of the
Yeah, you
foot
do.
thing, and then I have to find.
You're excellent.
Oh my gosh, I have troubles with my yeah, we're right.
Zoom doing that?
No, it's my computer. I have a touchy keyboard. We're starting right here. We have studied Eratosthenes.
We have studied Eratosthenes' world map of 200 BC in connection with the fact that we now know reliably that the Phoenicians reached both coasts of South America at about that time, and that the Phoenicians sailed from and returned to Carthage on the north coast of Africa, or to their sovereigns eastern Mediterranean port just north of Beirut, Lebanon. From there, cedars were shipped to Eratosthenes, Alexandria, and Egypt to build the big-bellied, stout, ribbed sailing ships. It is quite evident to us that Eratosthenes had great confidence that his world had been circumnavigated. Circumnavigated. I'm sorry. He knew that we live on a spherical planet. Why else would he have been inspired to make his remarkably accurate measurement of the Earth's circumference, etc.? The 200 BC coincidence of Eratosthenes' world map, Crates' world globe, and the Phoenician sky star globe advantage circumnavigation is highly visible only when using the Dynamaxian world map. Using Mercator's, the polyconics, or other world projections, it would never have been logically revealed. Of course, neither Eratosthenes nor the Phoenicians used the geographical names I employ. With the exception of the BC Greek spherical informed world mapping, all the post-Roman emperor popes and pre-1500 AD comprehensive maps show the world as flat-out system surrounded by an infinitely extendable planar wilderness. All the great pre-existing century empires, such as those of Genghis Khan, Alexander the Great, and Rome, employed the flat concept with civilization centered around the Mediterranean, which means sea in the middle of the land. The people in the times of Alexander the Great, or of Caesar, or of Saladin, all thought in that flat way. As yet today, simple elementary plane geometry is used by and taught to beginners. Solid is considered more difficult in spherical trig, ever more advanced and difficult. The real consequences of that, psychologically, physiologically, or philosophically, I'm sorry, Jesus Christ, and mathematically, are devastating. It means that inside the emperor we have something we call civilization, while outside the emperor begins to unknown wilderness, peopled with brutes and worse, and outside of that live dragons, and beyond the dragons, flat infinity. What we have in flatland is an only local definability surrounded by flat outward infinity undefinability. This meant then that the Greeks, in attempting to communicate their mathematical conceptioning, defined the circle as an area bound by a closed line of equal radius from one point, the triangle as an area bound by a closed line of three angles, three edges, and three vertices. The Greeks talked only of the area that was bound as having validity and identity, while outside, on the other side of the boundary, existed only treacherous terrain leading outward to boundless infinity, an unknown and unknowable wilderness. The feedback from this worldview has ingrained fundamental bias into present-day thinking. We can conceive only of one side of a line as definable, organized, and valid. Our side is natural and right, God's country, and vice versa. All humanity has thought of its own local area as being familiar, organized, and a priori, with all else remote and unthinkable. The Greeks oversimplified conceptioning with their misassumption that geometry could begin with plane geometry. That geometry could begin with plane geometry, which they said employed only three tools: the straight edge, the scribe, and dividers. They failed altogether to include the surface, on which they scribed as constituting an equally essential component of their otherwise experimentally demonstrated proofs of their various propositions. Because the earth of the earth on which they scribed was so large and its limits were unknown to them, they concluded that it was infinitely extended surface. They failed altogether to recognize the fact that you cannot have a surface of nothing. Any surface on which they scribed had to be a topological feature of a system. They obviously knew not of Euler's topology, nor of my system's geometry. See Chapter 4, Synergetics, Volume 1. Systems always divide all universe outside the system from all the universe inside the system. All systems are finite subdividers of macro and micro universe. Not knowing that they were always scribing on a closed finite system, the Greeks defined a plane geometrical polygon as an area bound by a closed line of so many angles and edges. They assumed that the area on the outer side of the line continued laterally to infinity and was therefore undefinable. What their closed lines always did was to divide all the finite surface area of the polyhedral system on which they scribed into finite areas, both of which were exactly bound by the surface drawn polygon's perimeter. Draw a triangle on the sand of a beach. You inadvertently divide all the surface of planet Earth into two areas, A and B. A, the triangle which you consciously and visually drew, and B, the enormous area on the outside of the consciously drawn triangle, consisting of all the rest of the surface of our spherical planet Earth. All that remaining surface of our spherical Earth is bound by the closed perimeter figure of three angles and three edges, which you scribed in the sand. Unbeknownst to them, the Greek Euclideans were always dealing in polyhedra of system geometry. Humans could not make a local Earth surface triangle without inherently making a vast terrestrial-sized triangle. The two terrestrial triangles, little a and b, A and vast B, in turn brought inherently into play the almost spherical, vastly high-frequency triangulated polyhedral system on whose surface they were scribing. This in turn, and unbeknownst to them, affected the rest of the universe, the macro universe outside the universe upon which they scribed, and the micro universe inside the system upon which they scribed. Thus, humans have always unknowingly affected all universe by every act and thought they articulate or even consider.
Hey, let's pause there just for a second, because he brought this up again the second time. And the idea that when I draw a triangle, outside of it is macro universe. But then he also says that inside that triangle is micro universe.
Right.
Even though we don't see it, we don't see the outside macro, even though we just assume it goes infinitely in every direction out away from that triangle. And it's so funny. I mean, it's so silly that when I was in school, I always considered what was inside that triangle. What's inside? There's the system right there. And I didn't consider what was outside of it. But he brings up 2 points. There's outside, macro outside, and then there's micro inside. And this comes back to the circles of irrelevancies, which I think is really important to show, if I may, to give this some continued context here. Because when he says that we have relevant, irrelevant. When he says that the triangle, is that not going to work for me? Okay, there we go.
It looks to me that something is forgotten, Steve, in what you say.
Go ahead. What is that?
Well, it says, whenever you draw a triangle, you are yourself in the triangle.
Whenever I'm drawing a triangle,
the triangle, you have what you call the familiar triangle and the unfamiliar triangle. Comes from that experience.
right?
So you are in the familiar triangle. So you are enclosing yourself and the familiar. That is what is coherent, that you perceive as coherent around you. That is the inside of the first triangle.
My point
So yes. So if you take that circle of relevance or whichever it is, let's just talk about the middle one.
the blue one.
Yes. So what he's saying that if the first triangle, because he said the circle is a triangle, like primarily people draw triangles, not circles initially,
Right.
the boundary, because it's simplest. So if you took that finite macro irrelevancy, too small, and then you took the almost, and then you took the boundary of it at that before the lucidly relevant. No. If you took the lucidly relevant and the outer boundary of it is a triangle, you are still the micro inside it because you don't know who you are. You only know.
Wait a minute, you're still micro if you're in lucidly relevant?
Yeah.
No, I would say that micro is inside of lucidly relevant, but it's so small,
Right.
I don't see it.
Hold on. I say, if your triangle were the outer boundary of lucidly relevant.
Right.
Do we see that?
The circle is now a triangle.
Yes.
Right.
So if you were that, you will be lucidly relevant.
Right,
Inside there, you see
Yeah.
it because you are familiar with it,
right,
but you yourself, inside, you don't know who you are. And that has been the quest, the existential quest. Who are we? You can see coherency in the lucidly relevant. You are lucid about it, meaning that you are familiar about what it is and how to operate it inside of it.
right.
But you don't know the finite micro irrelevancy because you have reduced yourself to a point.
Yeah. It's like an infinitely small dot in the middle of the triangle.
Yes.
I think I see what you're saying. That's what I visualize as well. Joe, are you getting that same picture?
I am.
Okay, because it's
I am.
Bucky's really bending us around here.
I think the most important picture is that there is no straight line. Everything is curved.
Yeah.
Everything is curved. And it's curved because it's finite.
So this almost relevant circle right here becomes an infinitely small dot inside of my triangle. And the boundary on lucidly relevant, this circle, becomes the triangle.
Yes.
And I sit in the blue stuff, this lucidly relevant triangle, not realizing that outside of it, there's a whole universe, a macro universe, which is obvious to me because I drew the triangle on a paper and there's something outside of it.
Mhm.
I should look there first, but also inside that triangle is that infinite dot in which the almost relevant and the finitely micro, too small, too frequent to be viewed, exists.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And then you realize that the twilight zone is because you need, is because of light. Do you realize that?
Yeah.
Yeah, because of light, you said, right?
Yes.
Light.
You have to take a
Light?
chunk at a time. That is, you have to store enough for you to induct.
Right.
And for you to make sense of that you have chewed, you need time for that. So what is at the boundary around that is a twilight. It's something that you are going to, it looks like it is relevant, almost relevant, but for the time being, for you to make sense of what you chewed, you need to see if those you choose that kill you. Because if it kills you in the meantime, you wouldn't think about what it is next to it.
That's right. I'm dead. And I like, Manu, that you brought up the twilight idea. That goes right along with the thing that I sent out this week on entropy, with the idea that the sun is bombarding the earth with photons of super high energy. And so, which is light. Let there be light, and the light comes out of the darkness. And this entropy thing says that that light, if light continues to, what happened at the Big Bang, he says, is the light goes out, the universe goes out in 10 minutes. This is what Stephen Hawking said. In 10 minutes, it's super hot, super vibrating, goes to its current size in 10 minutes, then it stalls out and starts to cool. And we have within 10 minutes after the Big Bang, we have our universe as we know it today. Although it continues to expand, it's basically the same as it was after 10 minutes after the Big Bang. But what happens is it hits the size, starts to expand, but also starts to cool. And as it cools, then matter starts to form, because matter can't exist in super hot everywhere, everything all the timeness. So as it starts to cool, then energy cools down and starts to coagulate into matter. And then the matter starts to coagulate and create planets and gases. And then the sunlight continues to hit those congealing little pockets of matter. And that's how life gets created. And
what is life, Steve?
it's what?
What is life?
Yeah, what is life? It's energy, right?
Yes, but what is it in the context of what you are saying?
I give up. What are you saying?
It's
What do you
fixing carbon.
It's what?
think?
Fixing carbon?
Fixing carbon.
Yeah,
So the question is fixing carbon, meaning that gravitational at work.
yeah,
Until when? Until it collapses in.
yeah,
Until all the galaxy collapses into another big black hole that emerging somewhere else. And
yeah.
then it starts the pulsating, is a pulsating phase of universe. That's why Bucky talk about the eternally regenerative universe.
Yeah.
It is the principle.
But also, we're using right now the Big Bang analogy, and there are several other, Roger Penrose and others have talked about other kinds of analogies that work like a black hole, Big Bang, and collapse. But that may not necessarily, the Big Bang may not have actually happened. It may be a big rollover. Anyway, but the idea, the metaphor is sound, that everything expands, it moves out towards the speed of light, it becomes, it hits the event horizon, and then all of a sudden there's an expansion and a cooling. And so all that process of entropy, of light, and what you brought up is twilight, the twilight zone. I had never thought of that in terms of photons. In terms of my reality is photons. And this also resonates with me because in Star Trek, they have the holodeck, and that's all based with photons. Holodeck is all photons. Which is interesting. I don't understand the science of the holodeck or whatever metaphor they're using, but twilight. Thank you, Manu, for the twilight invitation to look at twilight and photons and light, and almost enough light to see it. Tantalizingly almost relevant.
Yeah. We have to realize that the whole of these notions, the whole of the names and the words that we give is based on our paradigm of apprehension. The thing happened, we are in it, and we are dividing to try to make sense of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we divide, and our division is only possible because there's lag, because there's limit in our storage.
And I'm also seeing now lucidly relevant. Lucid, again, is based on the word light.
Mhm.
So twilight zone, tantalizingly relevant, and lucid has to do with photons. That's cool. Okay.
That's our role. Our role is that we are star makers. How do you make stars? You make star by burning energy first to a level where it becomes big enough to kind of shine as a star, that is to explode.
Oh,
Okay.
As humans have always unknowingly affected all universe by every act and thought they articulate or even consider.
Mhm.
Because everything I think or say or do exists in a system that is bigger than I
right.
understand or see. Yeah.
I missed making a point today about that. Really pisses me off.
Yeah.
It's completely separate. Anyway.
Yeah, but no, it provides a good context, doesn't it?
It does. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I drew a triangle on a, okay, good. If you want to go for it, I just wanted to say, I drew a triangle on a piece of paper, and Bucky points out to me that there are actually two triangles on my piece of paper. I've drawn one triangle, but there are two triangles. The little A triangle that's outlined by my lines, and the vast B triangle, the convex triangle that surrounds it.
Yes.
1 + 1 = 4.
We're always looking at the concave, our cave. What is our cave? Conspiring with our cave.
Yeah.
Together with our cave. Concave.
And the convex is quite vexing.
Yes. It's
Mhm.
I like that.
Wow. Okay.
So fortunately, the unrealistic thinking of humans has little effect on universe and evolution, whereas realistic thinking has cosmic effectiveness in pure principle. Realistic, comprehensively responsible, omni-system considerate, unselfish thinking on the part of humans does absolutely affect human destiny.
Yeah, I'd like to pause
If
right
the
there because that is profound.
Sure, it is.
If I'm thinking unrealistically, I'm going to have no effect. If Elon Musk,
That's true.
yeah, if Elon Musk had his head in his shoes, it would be a little consequence. But Elon Musk thinks realistically, and therefore he is comprehensively responsible, omnisystem considerate, unselfish, Bucky likes to put in there to jab my ego, right? And when I'm unselfish, omnisystem considerate, comprehensively responsible, realistically thinking, then I absolutely affect human destiny. Wow.
And comprehensively responsible is different than comprehensivity.
Yeah.
That that's a big difference because you're not comprehensive, but you're taking responsibility for your actions.
Yeah.
And that's a big thing, actually. And you're talking about just realistic. You know what realistic to me? Simple.
Yeah.
That's and simplification. And I was just reading a naval report today. No, maybe yesterday, or who knows? That they're unable. Their ships are sitting in dock, which may be a good thing. That primarily because of well, not primarily, one of the reasons is they're unable to get parts from different different suppliers all over the world, and they have these are complex structures, but they have more and more parts. Where the idea they should be looking to simplify and have fewer and fewer parts, doing more with less. And if you're doing more with less, you have less dependency on those suppliers, and you'd have less downtime. And so you answer your maintenance cost, and you would actually solve and essentially that's something that that's what Tesla did with their Model Y, and they have it down from 70 parts to 1 part.
Yeah. And they're 3D printing rocket engines now that went
That's
from
just crazy.
3,000 parts down to 4 or something because they're able to 3D print, because they're able to 3D print them. And it may be rhetorical, but still Bucky is saying something here to me that's I'm going to be repeating myself, that if I'm thinking realistically, I will in fact absolutely affect human destiny. But if I'm thinking unrealistically, in other words, if I'm thinking not in terms of omni-system considerations, if I'm just being selfish, if I'm looking at my own little world around, I'm not going to affect humanity.
No, you'll affect yourself.
Yeah, I have to think comprehensively responsible to omni-system considerations. And by doing that, I'm realistic. And when I'm realistic, I affect humanity. And when I'm selfish, when I'm not comprehensively responsible to omni-system considerations, I'm unrealistic, and I'm just gonna flap like a flag in the wind.
Yeah.
Well, and it's also, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
No, you go first.
Now, just going to say that is so actual. When you hear about the way we speak, we say we want to save the planet.
Mm-hmm.
We can't freaking save the planet. It will misbehave. That is, if we have unrealistic thinking and doing, nature will get rid of us.
Yeah.
Will get rid of us. Simple. That's the mean to me of, fortunately, the unrealistic thinking of human has had little effect on universe.
Yeah.
The only way, we just have one choice, is to think that we are part of a phase and to behave well within that phase in such a way that we are in accordance with the laws that govern that phase, the principles. That's all. So that's to say, we have realistic, that is our phase, realistic, comprehensively responsible. We assume that there is always a return. Omni-system considerate. Unselfish thinking on the part of human does absolutely affect human destiny. And that's what Steve was saying. That's nature, friend.
Yeah.
You are friend to nature, it treats you friendly. If you're not friendly to nature, it discards you.
Yes, it does.
When I say you is your species, at that level.
Thanks for letting me interrupt you there. And he's almost, he actually says the same thing in reverse in the next sentence.
That's shocking. If the realistic thinking can conceive of technically feasible options facilitating satisfactorily effective human fulfillment of its designed functioning as local universe information inventorying and local universe problem solving in support of the integrity of eternally regenerative universe, then the accomplishment of that realistic conceptioning is realistically effective in satisfying universe that human mind is accomplishing its destined evolutionary role.
Wow.
Wow.
The first half of the paragraph is convex and the second half is concave. The first half describes what won't happen and the second half describes what will happen.
And that is the principle, no?
Yeah.
It's duality principle that is basic.
Wow.
That's why I always think that if you can discipline yourself to always think comprehensively, that is in dualities, then you can be very effective in whatever you are doing.
I gotta show you guys my new book. It's called Starting with the Whole by Bucky. I don't know, you probably have it.
But we think that the whole is overwhelming. That's not that whole mean. The whole mean be comprehensive, even locally where be comprehensive. Because general comprehensive is comprehensive of the comprehensives. You get me? If you didn't think that there is a boundary and a boundary, beside that boundary, there's another system. And the two systems has to almost concatenate to make something that is functioning at a larger scale, then you will fail.
Yeah, I agree with you. The one thing that I'm a little bit unclear on was when it comes to Bucky is that his systems aspect of his approach is very clear to me. But the political that make it real, the political boundaries, it seems I don't know. He was about to get into the next paragraph there. It just seems tough.
But let me ask this, Joe. Simple, right? Is to be responsible mean to be comprehensive?
Yes.
To me, it is.
Absolutely.
Responsibility, Blessinger says, responsibility is response ability.
The ability to respond, absolutely.
The ability to
Yes.
respond
Yeah. So
appropriately.
if I'm
Yeah, you're right.
responsible, I'm obliged to be honest.
There it is right there. Comprehensively responsible.
Yeah. So it starts with the individual. Are you all the time responsible? And that is something that can be cultivated. Are you most of the time, let's not say all the time, are you most of the time responsible?
Most of the time, yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
but I'm not comprehensive.
Well, I
You
think
are,
you're more
you're trying to be you are striving to be comprehensive, striving to
I'm
be
trying. Yeah,
Yes.
I'm trying.
But when you just say people, you have to be comprehensive, it is overwhelming.
Yes, that is true.
Yes. So the final examination is that of the individual.
And that's where integrity.
Yes.
Hmm.
You have to start being, you cannot build a big house on wrong foundations. If the
Right.
foundations are not appropriate, it's going to crumble whatever you put outward. So that it starts with you. You have to be comprehensive in recognizing that you can be in error. That's what you call also responsibility. It stems from the fact that you recognize that in what you're doing, you might be wrong. You might be imprecise.
Right.
And being open to correct, to tack, as Steve will say, in response to the signal that you have perceived after your action. That is a little test that we fail every day. We fail every day.
Absolutely.
Let's see.
Spectacularly.
And when the monster, every monster is fed with little spoon fed, it's going into something. And then when we become a monster, we're surprised.
Let's go ahead and finish reading this last page. We'll go down, we're starting at the 3 dots here, the 3 asterisks of the 3 stars. We'll go down to the next 3 stars. You want to continue reading?
Yeah, no problem. In our comprehensive reviewing of published academically accepted history, we continually explore for the invisible power structure behind the visible kings, prime ministers, czars, emperors, presidents, and other official headmen, as well as for the underlying hidden causes of individual wars and their long drawn-out campaigns not disclosed by the widely published and popularly accepted causes of those wars. There may be great significance in the fact that Pythagoras in Greece and Buddha in the Orient occur at the same time. In the 6th century BC, both are powerfully perceptively thinking and acting human individuals who, coming out of a past in which the mystically ordained kings counted and humans were omni-expendable pawns, produced mathematical tools and philosophic breakthroughs for individual humans forever thereafter to employ. Their scientific and philosophic gifts to humanity were in marked contrast to the self-advantaging military conquest of King Pythagoras in a little town north of Athens in the Near East, and Buddha in the Far East, utterly unknown to one another, co-occur as a vast amount of moral and spiritual thinking is taking place in the Near East, as recorded in the Old Testament of the prophets. Historical research indicates a succession of Isaiahs starting at about the same time Pythagoras and Buddha, and as the Greek school of scientists and scientific thinkers, running to 200 BC. Isaiah the second speaks of turning the swords into plowshares and spears into pruning knives, and leopard lying down with the lamb, and prophecies.
Prophecies.
Prophecies. Thank
Prophet.
you.
Mhm.
Prophecies. A little child shall lead them. Non-royal, non-military humans had words and mathematical tools and writing ability with which to innate a breakthrough toward ultimate emancipation of all humans. I
Oops,
don't
sorry.
anyway. No. It's not that. I just didn't agree with the line. Such individuals as Pythagoras and Buddha were unemancipated by the behind-the-scenes physical power structures. They were probably unnoticed at first. Their ever-advancing scientific conceptioning of the Greeks between 600 BC and 200 BC, as well as the comprehension and thoroughness of the spiritual writers, suggest that not only until 200 BC did the great power structures operating behind the official state's officers begin to find ways of putting brakes on the individual's metaphysical breakthrough. The power structure then began to enter into the cosmological formulations and begin to cut off the ramifications of human conceptioning and cope with able magnitude. Humans had found that each one had a private hotline to God. What the power structures needed was a way to put in a control switchboard so that the individuals who have to call up God only through officialdom's censor supervised switchboard. For example, the Roman Catholic Church, fortifying its proclaimed divine mandate as an intermediary between the individual and God, attacked technology because it couldn't eliminate these stresses of poverty. And much of the Roman Catholic business and prosperity was founded on the exploitation of misery. The business strategists of the Vatican were inherently against abortion, pregnancy being the single greatest source of confessional and donation money to the church. Herein lies the source of the church's persistent maintenance of its dogma and authority in the face of a technological, emergent, and potentially powerful humanity. As described before.
Oh, hang on, that's 3 dots. That's 3 dots and it's 10:40. Let's see if, maybe we can read further. He is making quite the claims there.
Not really.
You don't think?
I think it's pretty obvious.
Pregnancy is the source of donation and money?
Yeah. No, and probably people pay to get their sins forgiven. I mean, that's really, they're selling indulgences still. I mean, that's the way I took it.
It is based on the
Expensive,
exploitation. The church business was based on the exploitation of misery.
Yeah.
So having offsprings, you increase the misery class.
Yeah, no, keep them down.
Who were given, they will give the time they were served.
That's for sure.
Well, let's see. Do we,
we can get it there. We can get there.
You want to read some more?
Yeah, we can get there, but to 50.
We can. Yeah.
Everyone knows that one goes inland for the sea. One comes to ever higher mountains.
I think we're as described.
As described before recording graphically its presence abroad our planet, humanity had no line of communication reaching directly to us and today other than the physical sea and land building arts and handcrafting of small artifacts, as well as their designed interrelationships to be read in the burial positions of the skeletons and their artifacts, etc. Human universe Everyone knows that one goes inland from the sea, one comes even higher mountains. It was thought that if one went far enough inland, one would come to a mountain reaching to heaven and occupied at its highest point by God. More and more durable cosmological models of this world view were built, with living God kings assumingly to occupy the lesser heights after their death. How strong the king might be would govern the height of this mountain and surmounted by ever higher central mountain pinnacles. These square-based cosmological models are Nats or Gats and Watts of Southeast Asia, the pyramids of Central America, Mayas and Incas, the Babylonian ziggurats, and Egyptian pyramids. The design authority for the Watts was probably that of the priest navigators, who architectural skills derived from their knowledge of the principles of boat loading. The world around priest navigate boat building. Oh shit! Yeah, thank you. The world around priest navigators' cosmological authority was responsible for the astronomical observatory structures as yet standing in India, Mesopotamia, Crete, Egypt, England, and Central America. An early drawing of graphical chronicled civilization, the Watts involve gods of the seas and gods of the sky, as well as gods of the underground land. The fire, smoke, and lava of volcanoes, well known to men, indicated that down led through the horizontal plane of the world into a hell of brimstone and fire, just as up led everywhere, exclusively toward the serene blue heaven of the highest God. These cosmological symbol edifices, the Watts and Gats, had no interior spaces for religious or royal court ceremonies or for occupation by any living human except an astronomer. They were developed by designer priests and constructed by slaves only for the convenience of the livingly visible god kings after death, physical reascension from earth to become one more an invisible god of heaven, capable of returning at any future time to resume human or any other convenient form. Like animals, ordinary humans and human life were absolutely expendable, either as slaves or as sacrifices. As recorded in the stone carvings of Egypt and Mesopotamia, the history of world society begins with humanity at large knowing nothing of physics, chemistry, or biology. Humans recognized but few safe edibles. Humans had witnessed many lethal poisonings by superficially attractive items plucked from the mysterious scenery. Infection was rampant. Average survival was in the neighborhood of 22 years. That's horrible. Or about 1/3 of once in a rare while demonstrated biblically mentioned 70-year lifespan. Life was so fundamentally awful that no logic could persuade humanity to believe that the living experience was intended by the great God of the universe to be desirable in its own right. The only tenable assumption was that life on earth was suffered only in preparation for a life hereafter. It was reasoned that the worse life on earth proved to be, the better would be suffering earned life hereafter. Experience seemed to show that adequate sustenance in general was so fundamentally scarce that even in the hereafter, none could conceive of there being adequate life support for other than the pharaoh. This being evident to all, it was commonly assumed that if Pharaoh, the people's leader, could be safely delivered into the next world with all his sovereign equipment, thereafter he might be able to get all his people safely delivered to him in the afterlife paradise. Because life in this world was so tortuously devoid of life support, desperation drove humans to thievery and vandalism as a general way of life. To get the pharaoh and all his equipment and riches safely into the next world involved building a stone mountain on top of his burial chamber in the superstable form of the pyramid. This called for the supreme engineering, designing, and large-scale building capability. Thus, it came about the economic authority patronage that employed and subsidized pyramid designing, architectural engineering, and building efforts of the intuitive artist, scientist, poet, inventor, engineer, and initiator of the early Egyptian period was exclusively in life hereafter of the pharaoh. The authority to employ whatever technological capabilities he could muster from the non-obvious but intellectually conceptual resources hidden in the scenery went to the artist, scientist, inventor to support his reorganization of environmental potentials for the advantage of the life hereafter of the pharaoh and his most faithful servants. With all building, there is a temporary make-ready structural scaffolding. The artists, scientists, inventors exist in the times of the earliest pharaoh needed to elevate and move gargantuan rectilinearly chiseled stone blocks into place. They could readily see that the thousands of slaves available could shovel together great approach hills of rocks and sand, upon which they could first lay parallel tracks, delimbed tree trunks, and thereafter, with other tree trunks, could pry forward the wood roller mounted blocks of stone. The pharaoh created architect may have been the first human in history to conceive of the principle of the lever and its ability to move great rocks. That's interesting. Whoever he was, he proved that with ever longer and ever stouter levers, he could vastly augment the muscle work of whose armies of slaves. Moreover, he discovered that the degree of work advantage to be realized with various size levers could be mathematically calculated. The pharaoh died. They entombed him, and he supposedly went to the world of the eternal hereafter, accompanied by all his riches. So you go, well, whatever. When the pharaoh died, his artist, scientist, inventor was rewarded by being entombed with the pharaoh, along with the other most faithful servants, so that they could be the first humans in universe of Pharaoh's people to enjoy the blessings of the hereafter. But knowledge of the levering effectiveness remained in the world. That was a real contribution. The next architect, engineer, genius for the next pharaoh, using the levers, wood-long rollers and wood-long tracks invented by his predecessors, discovering that many of his army of slave workers were dying, were unable to work for lack of adequate food. To correct this condition, he conceived of shunting the waters of the Nile into slave-produced irrigation ditches, which led the Nile into the potentially fertile floodlands bordering the river. The artist scientists rearranged the living environment in ways that technologically increase the human advantage of the antechamber, make ready for the hereafter world. After each pharaoh's entombment, the principles were first discovered and objectively employed by the succession of Leonardo-type architect engineers of the pyramids. The scaffold phase tools such as the lever were not forgotten amongst the as yet living people. The departed architect engineers left behind the irrigation ditches, which continued to irrigate and grow more food in this antechamber to heaven world. The irrigation ditches did not disappear by going over into the hereafter. Use of the physical scaffolding capabilities in this pre-heaven world by the living society persisted and multiplied, pharaoh by pharaoh. The technological inventiveness of the pharaoh's respective scientists, artists, architects became evolution's comprehensive environment advancers. Finally, the inventory of technological scaffolding equipment employed this rearranged environment world in the pre-death days of the pharaoh altered the spontaneous thinking of the living. The work effectiveness of the living slaves as inventively led by the era's artist scientists became so prodigious that it became obviously possible not only to prepare magnificently for the most favorable afterlife of living pharaoh, but also to prepare magnificent vandal farting stone edifice covered tombs for guarding the sub-pharaoh nobles' entry into the afterlife. During the next succession of dynasties, the progressively ever more prodigious inventory of environment controlling technology concurrently available in this world to serve as scaffolding for enshrinement of the eternal afterlife of the pharaoh and nobles, multiplied to such accelerating degree that in due course it became spontaneously apparent to all concerned that the total of now workable technology made possible accommodating the safe entry into the afterlife of the rich middle class society. The afterlife enshrinement of the prosperous middle class that occurred in the Greek and early Roman BC period brought about the development of carved marble mausoleums and burial urns. Eventually, the environment altering technology capable for this 99% of humanity miserable temporal activity being conducted in this life to ensure the exclusive afterlife enjoyment only of kings, nobles, and middle class wealthy became so vast that new human perception inspired the prophets Buddha, Christ, and Muhammad, and probably vast numbers of other known intelligent and inspired humans to assume that there now existed adequate technical know-how and materials to build in this world physical scaffolding structures that would provide for safe entry into the afterlife, not only of the king, nobles, and middle class, but also of all humanity, including the most lowly commoners and slaves. They did not occur in one day. There was gradual dawning awareness on the part of a few that the changing technological capability vis-a-vis the environment promised a vast change in the human affairs. This bred an era of prophets and thinkers heralding general human qualifications in this life for entry into the next life. the Old Testament and dramatic manifest of this period for
Hey,
millennia.
let's stop. Hey, let's stop there.
Okay.
For this period. That's the end of a paragraph. Then for millennia, the prophecy of Southern Pacific. We'll pick that up next week. So you've been reading a lot, Joe. Let's give you a rest. Manu, how are you feeling and what's your takeaway today?
I really feel kind of impressed by the way Bucky can recount in a logical way the process of evolution and tell the stories of the wise and the generalization of knowledge that is comprehensive, that liberating. So to me, again, it comes to the fact that the worst that we can have is to be ignorant.
Mhm.
And the second worst is to act haphazardly. In other words, the best is to be educated and to act upon that education and to be open to changes that inevitably will be required because of that feedback loop. Is an elementary system, input, output, around, but it's quite effective and quite liberating. Otherwise, I'm really grateful for the time that you guys put into this and that we study and grow together and that we can probably influence other people. So that's my takeaway. Steve, maybe, let Joe conclude because he will be tired. How do you feel? What do you take away?
Well, I'm glad we're reading this together, because we get a chance to pause and to interject what's going on in today's world, which I think is exactly what Bucky would want everybody to do. He would want, whether they agreed with him or not, they'd want him to stop and pause and consider livingry instead of weaponry, and consider the fact that everybody can get taken care of, which is, I think, what he's moving toward in this discussion tonight. So I'm really grateful for that. And Joe, how are you feeling and what's your takeaway? And we'll end the call after you're complete.
I'm feeling great. I really appreciate you guys being here tonight, and allowing me to read, participate, and it's an honor to be here with you guys every week. And so, for me, just looking at things comprehensively, I think of that as having a discussion with someone recently about how comprehensive thinking is also thinking about things on the margins, which means you're taking care of the little things. And that's really what we're talking about when we're talking about the circles of relevancy and comprehensive thinking. A lot of shameful stuff in that, those words. Truth, it was all truth, but I mean, a lot of slave labor, a lot of corruption, stuff we're still dealing with today. I don't mean to end on that note, but there is that's just the reality, and so that's to be noticed. But I am taking out. I think that the more we talk about the concepts that Bucky's, talking about within these within the narrative, the more we're able to put together, connect dots, and I think the circles of relevancy were a really nice addition tonight. So there's a lot there. There was a lot there, and hopefully we get to a point where we're building living grey and not necessarily they did talk about their how there were wars started and without any kind of a kind of transparency, and it seems like we still have that problem today. Anyway, so let's hope that we keep trying to do better. Anyway, the one thing I did want to say is that it was very important is calibrating. Something I had written down tonight when we were going over the circles. I think that's really important when we're talking about setting boundaries and understanding what is possible, tuning and calibrating, because we talked about that, and that was one of the main things I had written down. It's hard to draw that boundary. We can always draw it smaller, but whatever. It's really trying to draw that boundary correctly. Anyway, I had a great time. Thank you for staying extra. I had a blast. And thanks for getting up. Nice to see your new place, Steve. And I can't wait to see you guys on Wednesday. And if not, I'll talk to you guys sooner.
Cool.
Sure.
Take care,
Thank you.
guys.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.